Hello again. This is Phil Amerson with the To Be and Do podcast, where we look at the importance of interdependence and not just independence. And today I'm delighted to have my friend Bud Herron with us. I could go on and on about all of his history and qualifications. This is a genuine newspaper guy who has played almost all the roles that could be played in the paper. Did you ever run the presses?
No, they kept me out of there. They wouldn't allow that. That'd be a little much.
Well, welcome, Bud. It's great to have you
Phil.
here.
Appreciate it.
Part of what we want to do in this first episode of two is to just know a little bit more about your history. I know you grew up in Hope, Indiana.
That's right.
Yep.
Born in hope, die in despair.
Well, tell us a little about your life journey. We've bumped into one another several times along the way.
Well, I think I'll probably ought to start where most people do, which is with the most unimportant part of it all, and that's what positions I've held. And everyone starts there because they want to prepare for their obituary, and that's always listed, you know. But I had several careers, and the longest one was 40 years in newspapers, and that whole thing started because I loved to write, and I did as a small child, and in going to school in Hope, by the time I was a senior in high school, I was the editor of the yearbook.
Oh.
And that was big news. The teacher who made me that did so my junior year, and then she left, and the woman who came in really didn't care for boys at all. And so we had a bit of a squabble, and I got kicked off the staff.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, I got kicked off about February. My picture's still in it like I'm the editor, but she'd already thrown me off. And I, being a rebellious sort of guy, I went to study hall and recruited some people. And we went down to the local newspaper, the Hope Star-Journal, weekly, where I worked on and off because we would print it. He came over from Edinburgh, and the printer did. And he knew
So wait a minute. You actually wrote for the local paper?
Yeah, when I was 14, I was writing for them, reading, who ate dinner with whom and all that stuff. But anyway, Clyde, who came from Edinburgh, was the press operator, and he was a drunk. And so, but we couldn't run that press, had this little flatbed press. So the editor and I would sweep the place out and write a few things and then look for his liquor because he'd hide it all over. And then he would run the press and so forth. But anyway, I knew him, and when I got kicked off the yearbook staff, I went down there and started an underground newspaper, and we called it The Protester.
Okay.
And had a flag with, you may disagree with what I say, that type of thing, but defend till the death your right to say it. And anyway, didn't make very much many points with the administration because we printed our first copy, and I brought it to school, and I stuck it in all the teachers' mailboxes, and I started trying to sell it for a penny a copy. And
how did that go?
That really well. I didn't make any money, but a lot of people took it. And so it was quite a thing. The teacher that had thrown me off class, she was screaming and throwing things. And so they... So
that wasn't the end of your newspaper career, just
the beginning, and we finally put out 4 issues of that and went bankrupt because that was my first lessons in the publishing, was that it is a business.
So any more in Hope, or did you then go to college?
I went off to college, and the end of this whole thing in journalism is I ended up my title. I was the group publisher for Home News Enterprises, which ran 5 weekly or daily newspapers in Indiana, Columbus Republic and Daily Journal in Franklin and Seymour and a bunch. And we had several magazines and things. So it was a lot of business stuff. I was on the dark side. I was no longer in the news side. But before that, my dad died when I was 16, and he always wanted me to go to college, and so I did. Didn't have any money. My mom didn't have any money. I had some Social Security. So I went off to IU my freshman year and proceeded to flunk almost everything except composition. And I actually was put in an honors class in composition. So I was getting ready to be thrown out on probation after the first semester. and I needed money. I couldn't pay them back anyway, so I wrote the newspaper in Franklin or in Columbus, and I told them I was an honor student in journalism, and
that's true.
It was true, and I had an honors thing in composition, so they hired me, and I came for the summer, and from then on, my education was all on the job. They had me back every summer for 4 years, and while I was at IU, and that was kind of amazing. They even gave me a little scholarship to go back, but I never was all that good at IU. I didn't fit in with the academic stuff. I didn't care about it, and I sometimes read my books, but only after I already flunked class. It was almost like that. So
did you write for the Indiana Daily Student?
Oh yeah, they put me on the Daily Student staff, and my sophomore year, freshman year, you didn't go to the Daily Student, but it was a part of the curriculum at the time, and I sure did. And then
how about the local Bloomington paper?
Yeah, well, the Bloomington Tribune had just started, and so it was going against what was then the Herald Telephone, Herald Times later, and so I found out I could make money over there copy editing because I'd worked at a real newspaper in Columbus, and so I went over and started doing that. And I didn't show up the day for my classes at the in journalism in Ernie Pyle Hall, and the publisher came over to do something on IU campus one day, and went into Ernie Pyle, and there on the bulletin board about 4 weeks into the semester was a sign that said, "Has anyone seen Bud Herron?" Because I was supposed to be a page editor and I hadn't shown up. I was making money at the other place, but maybe not the way to go to school. But I tell you what, college educations are great for academically for some people. For me, where I learned, I got very active. The first thing was in the great religious debate that started by Michael Scriven, who he went around all the freshman dorms to he was an atheist evangelist, and he was and so Michael was going around and had all of these people who just shown up from Pumpkin Center Baptist Church just furious. But I was getting a kick out of it because it was interesting. I loved the debate. I loved the
So
thing.
If I remember, he debated Leroy Hodap, who later was a bishop in the church.
He did, and I didn't know Leroy at the time. I knew him later, but that was a turning point in my religious beliefs. I mean, I'd grown up in a household that had no religious beliefs, except my grandma was a Pilgrim Holiness, and she almost killed all of us with her religious beliefs. So anyway, you're right. And Leroy Hodap was the example that brought me back into thinking about religion. And that he had three debates with Scriven, and he was the only pastor in all of Bloomington who was brave enough to go into the auditorium and debate him intellectually on the existence of God. And it struck me. I think Leroy lost that debate. In fact, I even told him I thought he lost that debate. Scriven kind of put him under on some good points. But what he told me is there's more to religion than intellect. And I saw something in Leroy, and his demeanor, his kindness throughout the whole thing, but yet his belief, which was very well stated. I just admired him, and I did for years before I ever met him. But he made me once again interested in the church, and so I finally did graduate from IU with I think as close to a 2-point average as you can get. But I did get out. I also, other influences in college was I got involved in the anti-war movement, and a guy named Guy Loftman and Robin Hunter were the two people in my class who were in SDS for a while, and they organized the early protests, and so I was very, very much involved in that, and I had a lot of extracurricular going on, and I learned a lot of stuff, and I learned a lot in the dormitories, debating with the people, and
we're going to talk about one of your roommates in the next episode.
Absolutely, Pat Patterson, he is. He's a remarkable guy, but I got my education on the streets and in the some of my professors I were good and I learned from them, but I grew up in a situation where I didn't do well in school, in grade school and high school, because if I made good grades, they always had this thing in conduct that says does not respect authority. And my dad loved that because he didn't respect authority. And he told me, he said, what you should do is question authority. And he said, why should they think you should respect something you haven't even questioned? He said, if you question it and find out there's validity, respect it. But, you know, the teachers thought I should just respect them out of the bag, and I never did that. So I had a lot of problems and got put on disciplinary probation at IU for that. So anyway, got out of that.
And then you were in, you were in Africa for a while.
I was indeed. I fell in love with the daughter of a United Methodist minister, Grester Kemp. And Ann and I got married, and I was just fed up with Richard Nixon, and I wanted to leave the country. And when he got elected in '68, and so my wife and I decided that we would get a contract somewhere to teach out of the country. And we mentioned it to his dad, and her dad. And he said, "Well, why don't you go to Japan, teach in Japan?" Fine. So we signed up and got all the paperwork done, got approved, and I got a call from the Board of Global Ministry. Said, we want a journalist in Sierra Leone to do the magazine and do some work in literacy and stuff, and we did, and we went to Sierra Leone.
So that's where I met you, I think, or did we meet before that?
Well, I knew you through Ann, but I think where we got close was when we were in training to go to Sierra Leone, and it was a wonderful cross-cultural kind of training and taught respect like it should be in the church. And we got to Sierra Leone, found out that we were the first United Methodists into the old EUB field. It was an EUB field, and the very traditional missionaries in pith helmets. And
EUB, for those who don't know, is the Evangelical United Brethren Church, and it merged with the Methodist Church to become the United Methodist Church in, I guess, '72 is finally when the merger was put in place. May have started earlier.
Yeah, I think it started in '68, but it
started in '68.
Yeah.
But Bud was a part. The reason I got to know Bud, I knew Ann from childhood, his wife. But the reason I got to know them, Bud again, was my wife and I were part of an internship for folks with the old Board of Missions, and we were in Latin America, in Panama. But a part of the training also involved people that were in the programs that Bud and Ann were in. I think you made a 2-year commitment?
It was a 3-year commitment.
3 year.
We came back after 2 years because our son was born there, and he came down with typhoid, and we could not get it handled over there, and so we ended up coming back a year early. But
So this podcast is about people coming together. Looking back on your journalism work in those early years and your time in Sierra Leone, what did you learn about belonging and relating to others?
Well, I learned that you have to listen. That's the number one thing. And you got to kind of put your arrogance on hold because, I'm an arrogant person. I wouldn't be a good journalist if I were a little bit arrogant. But at the same time, you have to listen and respect. And that's the number one thing of bringing people together to me.
Learning to listen. We're going to end here for this episode of To Be and To Do. This is Philip Amerson with Bud Herron. You can find more about our programming and our blog at belongingexchange.org. And we'll look forward to hearing many more stories with Bud Herron.